You were listening to episode number 64 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking with Dan Romanchik, KB6NU, the author of the No Nonsense Study Guide. We're going to talk to him about how to teach a tech class. We're going to talk about some upcoming events and contests. We're going to talk about some hamfests for the next 2 weeks. We got our Facebook question of the week and a couple other things. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Again, this is episode number 64, and we are talking with Dan Romanchik, KB6NU, about how to teach a technician class, as well as some, general and extra. All this can be done basically for any type of class, but more specifically, we're talking about the technician class licensees. Couple things before we get started with the interview. You can find today's show notes as well as all the links that we're going to be talking about and the events and all that good stuff in the show notes of today's episode, which you can find at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/64. That's the number 64. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com, and the group's address is facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio. I do have the page still there. Wish I would have gone with the group first off, but anyways, the page can be found at facebook.com/everythinghamradio. You can find me on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio and on Twitter at K5CLM. So, first off, the Facebook question of the week last week had some pretty good responses to it. This week's question, the question is, what is your most exciting contact you've ever made? Now, my most exciting contact I've told y'all about before, but I'm going to tell you about again in case you didn't hear it. Back in, I believe it was like 2000, something like that, when the Olympics were going on in Australia, my ham club had a club camp out that week, or one of the weekends that the Olympics was going on. Well, at the Olympics, they had a special event station, and we had a ham station set up at our camping area, and we were, just kind of messing around a little bit. Well, as I was scanning through 10 meters, and of course, this is like at one of the peak times of the sunspot cycle, it just so happens, I heard this person calling CQ, and it was a call sign that definitely did not recognize, and definitely was not American. So I tried to call him back, and I tried a couple times, and I finally made the contact. I actually made the contact to Australia from from Texas, and it was on 10 meters. And that was my most exciting contact. So what is yours? Tell me about your most exciting contact that you've ever made. Maybe it's the longest one you've made. Maybe it's the shortest one you've made. Maybe it's you talk to your best friend or something like that for the first time on the radio. Tell me what your most exciting contact you've ever made was. Okay, we do have a new sponsor this episode. I'm not going to tell you all about them right now. You will find out about it a little bit later, but thank you to this sponsor. And I guess that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and start our conversation with Dan Romanchik. Again, his call sign is Kilo Bravo 6. November uniform. He is the author of the No Nonsense Study Guides, as well as a CW book. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it is mentioned a little later in the interview as well. And he's got several books. He's got a blog, and so I'm gonna let him tell y'all a little bit more about him and about what we're talking about. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey everybody, today we are here with a friend of mine that you've heard quite a bit about on my podcast, especially here recently, and that is Dan Romanchik, and his call sign is Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform. He is the author of the No Nonsense Study Guides, which we've talked about previously, and I'm just a big fan of these. So, Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got started in the hobby, and especially with the teaching aspect, and about your books and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, it's great to be on your show, Curtis. So I've been a lifelong ham. I got my ham license when I was 16, and been a ham ever since. I wasn't real active at times during there, but that's pretty common for ham radio operators.
Oh, yeah.
About 12 or 13 years ago, I got back into the hobby in a big way. And about 10 years ago, well, actually a little bit more, I started my blog, KB6NU.com, and that pretty much vaulted me back into the hobby in a really big way. And sometimes I like to joke that I have the #1 rated ham radio blog.
Yeah, and you actually do. If you search for it on Google and search for ham radio blog, you're #1, my friend.
you beat me to the punch there. That doesn't mean it's the most widely read or the best on the net, but it's Google rates it #1.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous about that. You're gonna have to give me some pointers.
It's longevity. It's longevity. Honestly, that's if I had to point to any one thing, it's longevity, because Google likes longevity. Mm-hmm. You know, that's just the way it is.
Right.
So anyway, ham wise, I'm obviously a big CW operator. And but I like to do lots of different things. I build stuff. I build a lot of kits. I recently built this Hard Rock 50 linear amplifier for the KX3 I have. I like to I like to think about everything, and whether I get around to it is another question. The latest thing I've been thinking about is getting more into satellite work. That seems like a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
There's just so much to do in ham radio that you can't get around to all of it. But I like to do a lot of different things.
Yeah, and you never really get bored with it. If you're bored, try something else.
Right, absolutely. So anyway, through the blog kind of got me started into the study guides. And so take a step back. So I'm trained as an engineer. I have an electrical engineering degree, but after doing engineering for a while, I really, tell you the truth, I really got kind of sick of it. And then I got lucky. I got a job with a magazine called Test and Measurement World. And I wrote about electronics test and measurement for a while for this magazine. And they really turned me into a writer. Yeah, taught me everything I know about writing, really. And then the study guide, I started the blog, then the study guide thing hit. So what happened there was I was at a field day, and this guy walks up and I was sitting at the public service desk, the public information desk, and he says, "Hey, you know what? I got this study guide that I want to try and get out more." And he showed it to me, and it was like one of the first versions of my no-nonsense study guides. And I said, "Well, I tell you what I can do. I can put this on my blog." And so I put it on my blog, and we were giving it out for free at that point. And, it was relatively popular. People downloaded it. It was free after all. Mm-hmm. And then when the time came to update it, when they were updating the question pool, I couldn't find the guy. I emailed him the email address I had. I sent him snail mail at the address that was listed in the FCC database. Never got a response from him. So I said, well, this thing is too good to let go. And I updated it myself. And then I did the general class and the extra class, and I don't know, the rest is history, as they say.
Right. Well, those books, I must say, are very awesome. You've definitely put a lot of work into them, I can tell. And, that's really what we're going to talk about here today, y'all. We're going to talk about how to teach a technician class. And Dan, I'm sure you've done a lot of classes. I've done quite a few. We typically have one a year, and I've done this for like 22 years now. So, so I've taught some, but all the ones that I have are spread out over a month or 5 weeks. We do one night a week for like 2 weeks, and then on the fifth week we give the test. Kind of go do a broad overview and then give the test again. But you don't do that. You actually do a a one-day class. Can talk to us a little bit about that, how that works?
Well, so one of the problems you have with, and maybe you can speak to this even better than me, perhaps, is with these multiple week classes, people drop out. Mm-hmm. Either they lose interest in it, or the family takes over. They have to do family things. But I think that's a real problem. So, and the idea didn't start with me, but some people had started teaching these one-day tech classes. Sometimes they call them ham cram classes because they're really not teaching the material. They're just cramming the answers into people. And so I said, well, I'm going to try doing that myself. And I had such good success with the first couple of them. I've done them ever since for the last 5 or 6 years now, at least.
So when you're teaching them, do you just basically, I know a lot of the ham cram classes that I've heard about, basically they just teach the test. Is that what you do, or do you do something different?
Well, no, I do it a little bit differently. It basically is teaching the answers, but I also use stories from my amateur radio experience to bring points home. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. There's a couple questions about using ferrite chokes to reduce radio frequency interference. Uh-huh. And I always tell this story. I tell the story of what happened the first time I set up a 40-meter dipole here at this QTH. And what happened is I set up the dipole, had my antenna analyzer, tuned it up, everything was looking good, hooked it up to the radio, started calling CQ. First I found a clear frequency, then started calling CQ. The next thing I know, my wife is running down the stairs. She says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I just tuned up the antenna, calling CQ here." She says, "You're opening and closing the garage door."
Oh my goodness.
And it was true. I was opening and closing the garage door. Well, somehow RF was getting into the wire that connected the switch on the wall to the garage door opener unit.
Wow.
And what was the solution? I happened to have some ferrite chokes. I wound that wire around one of them, cooked it back up, problem solved.
Well, at least it was your garage door, not your neighbor's.
I know. Yeah, I know. And but that's an example of what I do, is I tell stories like that all through the class. So while I am mostly teaching the answers, I'm backing it up with my own experience, and that gives everybody it gives them more than just the answers. Let's put it that way.
Right. So, a lot of times when I read about these ham cram classes, and I've seen a lot of comments on those, especially talking about just teaching the test, a lot of people say, well, you're just adding to the lack of knowledge that our hobby has turned into. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that to, a whole bunch of points, but in a way I can actually see their point in that. So what do we do to get around that if we do a ham cram class?
Well, so the thing to do is you can follow it up with other classes. And to be honest, I haven't been that good at doing that. But what I do, and what I tell people, is that since you've been in my class, you can consider me your Elmer, and you can ask me any question about any ham radio topic, and I'll do my best to help you and answer the questions. And what I found is that the ones that are really interested in pursuing amateur radio more fully will take advantage of that. The other ones, generally won't. But I don't feel bad about that, because those are the people that sort of would fall by the wayside anyway, no matter what kind of class you gave them. Mm-hmm. For example, spouses that are taking the class and getting a license because, their husband or wife already had a ticket. Kids who are doing it because their parents insisted. Things like that. I get a fair amount of those kind of people in my classes. And I mean, that's okay, but, so if they don't come to a more fuller understanding of the technology and everything, well, I'm okay with that. Mm-hmm. If you know what I'm saying, because I have a lot of people that have gone through my classes that have become active amateur radio operators, and I can point to those people and say, yeah, those people were my students.
Mm-hmm.
So,
one thing that I've noticed with all the classes that we've taught, bad English there, sorry about that. Yes, you say that, there is a drop-off rate, and absolutely, we'll typically start with about, 10, 20 people or so, and as the weeks go on, it'll drop down to 5 or 6 or something like that. But out of those 5 or 6 that end up finishing the class, typically all of them, or at least, all but one of them, pass the class. What kind of pass rate do you have with your type of class?
Oh, I get close to 90%. It's between 85 and 90%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, and the ones that don't, and we're probably talking a little bit about this later too, and the ones that I find that don't pass were the ones that didn't read the study guide at all before the class. Mm-hmm. And, so I always remember this one woman, she says to me after she failed the test, she says, I should have read that book. I said, yeah, you should have.
Yeah, it might have helped just a little bit. Even with the multi-class, you still have to study the book, because we've noticed that a lot. We can always tell when somebody will take it home and actually read the book in between classes, because if they don't, they'll get barely passing or fail outright. And
the ones that have read the book will ask better questions too.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talk about just a cram class, just a 1-day class. What do you do to get the word out on your class, on when it's going to be, how much it's going to cost, where it's going to be at, all that good stuff?
Right. So what I've done is I've put together this mailing list. And the mailing list is sort of the basis of my advertising. That mailing list includes people that have expressed an interest at some point in taking the class. And I still have names on this mailing list going back more than 5 years. People that said 5 years ago they wanted to take it and never got around to it. So some of the emails are kind of out of date. But also on this mailing list are the newsletter editors from a lot of the local clubs, the local emergency response teams, the CERT teams, and the county emergency management types. I have the local IEEE chapter on this mailing list. IEEE is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. So I just have a bunch of these email addresses that have proven to be good, fertile ground for students in the past. About a month or two before the class, I'll send out an email saying, hey, this is when I'm having the next class, and have people contact me. Mm-hmm. My next class is actually going to be on May 6th, so not quite a month, and I've already got like 18 people, I think, signed up to take it. So yeah, this one will be over 20. And the other thing, I live here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is home of the University of Michigan. So we have a kind of a built-in constituency here, if you will. One of the professors at the university teaches a course in satellite communications, and he gives extra credit to the students that get an amateur radio license. Uh-huh. So I teach the class 3 times a year. One of them is always at the University of Michigan, and I get a big crowd when I do that.
And how many of those actually stay with the hobby, though? That's the question.
Well, I don't know. That is a good question. Probably not a real high percentage, but the University of Michigan Amateur Radio Club, since it got fired up again about 12 years ago, has been ongoing, has a great shack, and is a pretty active club. So, and I think I've contributed to that by getting more of those kids their licenses. Mm-hmm. So, it may not be a big percentage, but the ones that, just like we were talking, the ones that are fired up about it and very interested in it, stick with it. So, mm-hmm. So it all works.
What other kind of advertising would you recommend people or clubs do?
Well, so there, there's local, you could put an ad in a local paper. Here in Ann Arbor, we have a thing called the Ann Arbor Observer. It's a monthly magazine that has an events section. That's a free ad in there. I put an ad in there. I teach class. We're going to talk about venues later, but I teach classes at the library, and the library puts it on its calendar. And there's all kinds. Maker spaces. If you have a maker space in your community, not only tell them about it, but go to one of their meetings and talk about it at the meeting. A lot of the guys that have been in my classes are part of the quote unquote maker movement here in Ann Arbor, and so every time I show up at one of their meetings, they know I'm there to talk about my next ham radio class.
Well, speaking about a venue, how would you recommend somebody that wants to teach a technician or general or extra class, how would you recommend they go about finding some place to teach it?
Well, I just mentioned the library. Libraries are a good spot. I've taught we have a kids science museum here in Ann Arbor called the Hands-On Museum. I've taught classes there. They considered it part of their program. I've taught another place that I haven't done this personally, but other folks have. They've taught classes in churches. There's, your city hall might have a space that you could use. There's just all kinds of different venues to hold these classes.
Now, do you find a lot of places will donate a place for you, or do you find a lot of places that are cost?
Yeah. So like, for example, I just taught, actually it was a general class, but it was a general class, I taught at the local makerspace, and they let me use their classroom for this class, for free, because I wasn't charging. I didn't charge anybody to take the class. So, and the library's that way too. The library, I couldn't charge couldn't charge the students to hold the class there. The Hands-On Museum, on the other hand, did allow me to charge a small fee. And what we did there was we used the fee to help fund the ham radio station at the museum. So there's little ways you can do it. But most of these places, if they know you're not charging a fee, will let you use the space for free.
Okay.
At least I found that.
Right. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk to Dan a little bit more. We're going to talk about how he actually teaches the class, material that he uses, and whatnot. So stick around. We'll be right back. Are you tired of lousy propagation conditions and wondering how to work some real DX for a change? Maybe you spin the dial and wonder what's going on below the voice segment of the HF bands. The answer is, you're missing out. You're missing out on digital modes, a rapidly growing and exciting part of amateur radio. Work real DX with the incredible JT65 and JT9 modes. It's no exaggeration when I tell you, you will work stations you never thought possible, even using low power and compromised antennas. Have fun making new contacts in modes such as PSK31, Olivia, Radio Teletype, Slow Scan TV, and many more. The Rig Blaster Advantage is everything you need to operate these exciting digital modes. Made right here in the US, the Rig Blaster interface has set the standards for nearly 20 years. Thousands of satisfied operators have learned their Rig Blaster Advantage will provide solid digital communications, easy operating, and reliability. Don't miss out on the fun and excitement any longer. Head on over to everythinghamradio.com/WMR for more information and learn how to get your free USB port monitor with your purchase. And we are back with Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. He is the author of the No Nonsense Study Guide, as well as some other books as well. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. I think I'll give him some space here to talk to y'all a little bit about more what he does on his blog and the books and stuff that he's had. But let's get back to what we're talking about, how to teach a technician class. In the last segment, we talked a little bit about venues and about charging. What are your thoughts about charging or not charging for a class?
Well, I would charge. I mean, if you can charge a fee, I would charge a fee. And that maybe not a big fee, but I would charge a fee. And the reason for that is that even if you charge a little bit of money, people tend to show up more. Like if you don't charge them, they'll say, well, I didn't pay anything. I'm just going to not go.
Right.
And I'll give you an example. I taught this class at the University of Michigan in January. 60 people actually signed up to take the class.
Wow.
But only 40 people showed up. Well, they didn't have to show up. They had no money involved in it.
Right. No investment.
Yeah. Whereas at the museum, I would charge them $10, and I had a much higher turnout rate. I had very few people not show up, and those that did generally had a good reason, like there was an emergency at work, or they had a kid who got sick or something. I mean, generally they had a pretty good reason. Mm-hmm. So I would charge at least a little bit.
Right. Give them some kind of incentive to keep going. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. We find a lot of times, just like you, that, yeah, they might come to the first class, but after that, if they don't have anything invested in it, they're like, why am I wasting my time? Why am I, I don't have anything invested in this. I can always do it next time he has a class, or I have something better to do, or something like that. So I totally agree with you there, Dan. Definitely charge at least something.
And if you're doing this as a club project, then you could use the money for some club expense, or, buy a couple handy talkies and loan them out to the people afterwards, or, something, use it for a good reason.
Right.
Not just put it in your pocket.
So what about study guides? I mean, this is actually probably a really stupid question, considering that you're the author of the No Nonsense Study Guide here, but what would you recommend?
Well, obviously, I do recommend my own study guide, but I'll tell you why. And I didn't really plan it this way, but the technician class the No Nonsense Technician Class Study Guide really is kind of like the perfect study guide for the one-day tech class. It just sort of worked out that way, and it's sort of the same kind of style. There's just enough context in the study guide to aid in understanding without getting bogged down in a lot of too much technical information, if that makes any sense.
Right.
So it really is the perfect guide for the one-day tech class.
And not only that, but you can actually download it off of his website for free.
Well, right, and that's true. That's absolutely true. That's a good point. So like when students come to me, or say they want to take my class, I say, hey, and not only that, you get a free study guide, and I mean it just all works. It really just all works just right.
Now I'm assuming you said you did a general class. Did you use your study guide for that as well?
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, and I did actually make them pay for it.
I don't blame you there.
Well, I got to make a few bucks.
Absolutely. Time is precious. So do you, whenever you have somebody sign up, obviously your technician study guide can be downloaded for free in a electronic book version. What about those that don't really like the electronic version? Do you tell them to go to your website and buy it, a week advance, or when they register for it, say, hey, go and grab this and study it before the test, or what do you tell your students when they?
Yeah, as soon as they send me an email that they want to be part of the class, I reply saying, okay, I've put you on the mailing list. In about a week before the class, I'll send you more logistical information. I say, but the first thing you want to do is go and download my study guide and start reading through it. Just to get them prepared. And if they don't like the PDF version, which is the free version, I have a Kindle version, a Nook version, and even a print version. There is a charge for those versions, but they can't. But it's not that much. The Kindle version is $8, and it's readily available. They can get it like right away from Amazon. So. They're not stuck with just the PDF version. A lot of people actually get the PDF version and print it out. They're not that many pages, and they print it out themselves, which is another option for them.
There you go. That's very good point. So you tell them to download the study guide. What else, if anything, do you tell them to prepare themselves for the class?
Well, so I tell them to read through the study guide and take some online practice tests. That I think helps them gauge where they are, if they're passing them before they even come to the class, well, chances are they don't even necessarily have to come to the class. But I even get some people that'll say, I was, 70%, 75%. I got your guide or I went to the class and you cleared up a bunch of things for me in the class, and they pass with missing 2 or 3 questions. Mm-hmm. So, taking some of the reading through the guide and taking some practice tests really is the best preparation.
Okay. So what about if I'm going to go and actually teach a technician class, what would you recommend for somebody on that side of things?
Okay, so I really just use my study guide to teach the class. I have sort of a marked up version with some notes that I've made along the way, but I took the PDF version, printed it out, and I just use it. That's sort of like my script. I go from the front to the back. I've laid out the chapters just how I envision teaching the class, where I do all the technical stuff first. First thing we talk about is Ohm's Law, and run all the way through the operating procedures and stuff like that, and the rules. The rules are the very last. That's the most boring material, and I know. And I tell them that too. I said, you think this is boring? Wait till we get to the rules. and sure enough, it is. The reason for that, of course, is you can't almost think about the rules, right? I mean, you just have to memorize those answers. Mm-hmm. There's no way you can reason out some of those answers, you know. So anyway, that's at the end. So the study guide is laid out exactly like that. And so what I would tell people is, especially if you're going to use my study guide, just take the outline that's in that study guide and go from front to back.
I'll tell you what you need to do. Here's another way to make a little bit of side cash. You need to take your study guides and make a teacher's edition for it.
Yeah, I thought about that. And in fact, I'm changing the way I'm doing the study guide, actually. So what I did with the study guide was I did take each question and then reworded it as a statement and then sort of edited it all together, grouped like questions. I've actually changed that a little bit now, because when I teach it, I'll talk a little bit about a topic and then say, okay, here's the question. I'll say question, blah, 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 answer, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think the next version of the study guide is going to be more like that. It's still going to have the text that explains the topic, but then it's going to have the actual question and answer in there. I think that'll work out a little bit better. And I actually did. I plowed through the tech study guide and did that. I generated all the real questions, put all the real questions in there. And so when I teach it in May, I'm going to actually be able to tell them the exact text of the question. Before, I wasn't able to do that. Like, I could read the study guide and sort of guess what the question was. And I would say, well, okay, the question on the test is this, but it wouldn't necessarily be the exact text. Mm-hmm. Now with this new script, I'll be able to say what the exact text is.
So does your study guide does it actually cover every, 300 and some odd questions that the technician has?
There's over 400 questions now, and yes, there's every single question in there. And in fact, this is a funny story. Sometimes when I'm going through this, we have to go through these pretty quickly, right? We go through over 400 questions in 6 hours of instruction. And, yeah, I know, that's a lot. And one time I skipped over the question about the ITU, and the VE called me aside after the test. He says, Dan, he says, every person who had that question on the test missed that.
Oh no!
And I said, "Oh shoot!" So every time I teach the class now, even if I maybe skip over one or two, I always make sure to get the ITU question in there. And I tell that story. I tell the same story too. That way those people will never forget that. They'll always remember if they get that question on the test. ITU stands for International Telecommunications Union.
That would make me really feel bad if like they were would have passed if they would have had that
Right.
question. I would just feel terrible about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's why I really make a concerted effort to cover every single question.
So you're really not doing teaching the test. You're actually teaching the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And like for example, I'll give you an example. So there's a lot of questions on the tech test about safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll first off, I'll say, well, one of the reasons you want to be safe is, because you can kill yourself, I mean, I don't know if you remember the story, but there was a story about, 5 or 6 years ago about a family who was actually putting up an antenna for their grandmother who was the ham. But they did everything wrong. They were putting this antenna up on her roof at night near power lines.
Oh.
And so what happened? The antenna fell over, hit the power lines, and a couple of those people were killed.
Ugh.
And it's like, so I'll tell that story, but I'll explain the sort of the background for why you want to be safe, and then go on and say, well, almost in every single safety question, you always want to choose the most conservative answer because that's going to be the right answer. And so even just by saying that, hopefully I'm getting across the point is when it comes to safety, always be conservative.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the key.
Err on the side of caution.
Yeah. So that's how I teach these things. Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned that you go through all these 400 some odd questions in 6 hours. That's a lot of material to cover. I mean, why only 6 hours?
Well, because if you try to go too much longer, I mean, I suppose I could stretch it out to 7 or so, but I find if I can get through it in 6 hours, it's probably better because you're not going to hold people's attention much longer than that, mm-hmm. right? So that's one thing. Secondly, they're there on a Saturday. They want to get on with their day too, So, right. and then 3:30 works out well for our VE team. They come in at 3:30. We're done by 5.
So you actually give the test after.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, and that's part of it. So we give it, and I joke. I say, well, we start at 9. We're going to go to 3:30, half an hour for lunch. Couple 10-minute breaks in between. At 3:30, we're going to give you the test. Reason we're going to do it right then, so you don't forget anything. Mm-hmm. and that's true too, right? So that whole thing works. They're there from 9 to 5. It's not too much time for the VEs, to do their thing. Mm-hmm. It's not a burden on them, and it just all works. It all works real nicely.
Cool. So you do, 2 10-minute breaks or so, and then a half hour lunch or something?
Right, exactly. And I always tell people, I say, bring your lunch, because the half an hour is not a lot of time. Sometimes we're not holding the class in a place where there's lunch that's readily available. I mean, think about the time it takes to get to the place to buy lunch, buy it, come back. Mm-hmm. And then I say too is, I'm going to be here around lunch. I have my lunch here. You can ask me questions during the lunch break. So that works out well too. Mm-hmm. The ones that really need to ask some questions will stick around, and I'll answer their questions.
There you go. That sounds good. I have a question here that I have written down on my piece of paper, and I don't remember what I was going to ask about it because it didn't really stretch it out any more than what I was saying. I think where I was going with this question was, how do you go to have a goal in mind when you're teaching, before you break for your first break, or, obviously the flow has to be right, but do you have a goal that you set for yourself when you're teaching a class on when to take breaks and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's like, again, it's sort of stuck to my study guide. I want to get through the first half of it before lunch. That's just, and I forget the exact page. I should have figured out but of course that's going to be on my copy of the PDF, right? Mm-hmm. So, it may not be on everybody, may not be the same on everybody's, but that's what I work at. Get through half or a little bit more or actually half or a little bit less, and a little bit less because, again, I'm doing all the technical stuff in the morning, which is a little bit more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So if I get through close to half of it in the morning, I'm good.
Right. All right. Well, that sounds great. I think we've pretty well covered that really pretty well. Is there anything else that you want to talk about how to do the actual class before we take a break again?
No, let's just take the break.
All right. Well, we'll be right back with Dan, and we're going to talk about some other minor stuff as far as classes goes. And so stick around, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Dan, KB6NU, author of the No Nonsense Amateur Radio License Study Guides. My study guides have helped thousands get their license or upgrade to general class or extra class, and they can help you too. What makes them unique is my no-nonsense style. I don't bamboozle you with a lot of text. Instead, I give you just what you need to know in a simple, straightforward way that's designed to help you pass the test. One reader even told me, your study guide explained in a couple of paragraphs topics that the license manual needed a couple of pages to cover. Another wrote, the clarity and simplicity of your descriptions blew the license manual away. My study guides are available in paperback, in a variety of ebook formats, and even as audiobooks. Get your copy today. Go to kb6nu.com/ETHR for more info. Thanks.
All right, everybody, we are back with Dan Romanchik, KB6NU, and we're going to continue our talk about how to teach a technician class. And really this would go on with really any class, I'm sure. The general overview of it anyways would go. And Dan's books, the No Nonsense Study Guides, goes great with these. Maybe I'm a little bit biased here because, as you heard in the break between the last segment, Dan is now a sponsor of this show. So, Dan, thank you for sponsoring this show. I greatly appreciate it. And
my pleasure.
Hopefully, we will have a long-lasting partnership. So, just to let everybody know, total transparency here, Dan is a sponsor of this show. But saying that, I've read over his technician class. I haven't looked at his general or his extra one, but I've read over the PDF, the free PDF, and it's an awesome book. It really is. I highly recommend anybody that is wanting to take their technician class, license, test, or somebody that is, I highly recommend that you send them over to his website. And again, that's KB6NU.com. And I will have links in the show notes of today's episode as well. Some other links that we might touch on here a little bit. So, Dan, let's get back to how to teach the class. First question I really want to think about, in the class that I help teach, we have a PowerPoint presentation that was developed by W5YI. And for those of you who don't know who W5YI is, they are one of the two major VECs in the United States. And they actually have a PowerPoint presentation that they made, and that's really what we go by a lot. Do you have a PowerPoint presentation that you use, or do you do demonstrations, or what?
Well, that's a real loaded question. If you read my blog, I do not like PowerPoints. I think they put people to sleep. Now, having said that, it's better to teach a class with a PowerPoint presentation than not to teach one at all. Mm-hmm. But my own style is to not use a PowerPoint. Like I say, I think they tend to put people to sleep.
Right.
What I do is I always teach in a spot with a whiteboard or a chalkboard, and I'm always drawing on the board. And I also will do little demos. Like sometimes I'll bring in a multimeter and actually measure the voltage of a 9-volt battery. I have usually a little goodie bag of stuff like components. So when we talk about components, I'm able to pass around capacitors and connectors and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. My goodie bag also has a some feed lines in it. So there's a piece of coax. There's actually two pieces of coax. Like a piece of RG8 and a piece of RG58, because there's questions on the test about that, and they can actually see the difference. That's what I do. I prefer not to use PowerPoints and to draw on the board. And the other reason, I think, and this is just sort of a I don't know, kind of an off the wall kind of thing maybe. But I think moving, like I move around the classroom, right? And I'm moving when I'm drawing. I think that tends to keep people awake too.
Right.
Rather than having just sit there and having somebody talk about what's on a slide.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right.
So that's my preference anyway.
Yeah. A lot of times I've noticed, I mean, when I first started helping teach this class, we've kind of gotten away from it since then, but not only with ham radio classes, but any class really. A lot of times I'll see where somebody will have a PowerPoint presentation and they'll have bullet points on each slide or whatever, and basically they'll just read the PowerPoint presentation.
Oh yeah.
That's not teaching. That's just reading. I can do that easier than you can read it to me, especially if you don't read really well, or you substitute words, which one of our teachers has a real bad habit of doing that. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
But do you?
And that's why I try to tell a lot of stories too, because and even you could do that with PowerPoints. Even if you had PowerPoints, you could throw in those stories and it would mix it up a little bit. So think about doing that.
Right. One of the things that we do during our class when we're talking about the RF segment or the RF questions, we take one of those little coil fluorescent bulbs and hold a HT antenna to the bulb, and you can actually, when you key up the radio, that bulb will actually glow in your hands.
Yeah.
We did it before when we first started doing this. We actually got one of those, those long fluorescent bulbs, they're 4 foot long or whatever, and we would go out to our pickup truck and put it next to the HF antenna, and one of us would call CQ on HF, and you could literally see the bulb lighting up a good 2 feet or so from the antenna.
Huh.
So that's one of the examples we use, especially for the RF thing. Do you have any kind of real world demonstrations and stuff like that somebody might find useful?
Well, I haven't done that, but like I say, I've taken the multimeter, for example, and measured voltage and resistance, and that helps with that. I'm gonna have to think about that fluorescent light thing, because that is a good that would be a good demo. Mm-hmm. WB6NOA Gordon West likes to do that pickle thing, like burn the pickle demo.
The pickle thing. I don't think I've ever seen.
Yeah, you ever heard that?
No.
Oh yeah. So what he does, and this is a good thing, but and like in my class, I don't do it because it takes time. What he does is he gets a pickle, and then he connects AC to it. Actually, he sticks 2 electrodes in it and plugs it in the wall, and so what happens is that the pickle is, when it starts out, is wet and briny, right? So it conducts current through it, and pretty soon it burns up, and then you get no current through it. So that's one of his big demos.
I never would have thought about that.
But yeah, so I also have HTs bring HTs with me, and when we get to the part about there's questions about how do you program an HT, and the one is you can program the VFO or by the keypad, and so I do that, and then sometimes if somebody will be on the local repeater, I can actually show them how to make a call on a repeater and then talk to somebody and stuff like that. But I don't get too involved in the demos because we got to keep moving.
Right.
That's sort of the big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be kind of hard to do that. I think that's maybe one of the good things about having a multi-class thing, because you can spread it out, and over those 4 weeks, 2 hours a night, it basically is 8 hours, so it makes it a little bit longer and a little bit easier to keep everybody's attention as well.
Right.
But then again, you lose people halfway through, so you're kind of
yeah. Yeah, I know. It's a dilemma. It's a real dilemma.
So what are your thoughts about teaching kids? That's always been one of our hard parts, because the topic is so technical. What do you have any ideas? Have you done any younger kids?
Well, so this is actually a story I tell in the class too. One time I had two kids in the class. They were like 10 and 11. I mean, they were brothers, and they were like 10 and 11 or 10 and 12. And I got to the point where I was teaching the Ohm's law, and I said, well, okay, the equation is E equals I times R. And then by simple algebra, you get R equals E over I and I equals E over R. And the kids in the back says, yeah, but we haven't had algebra yet. It's tough because, for those kids actually passed because they were smart kids, and they I paid a little bit of extra special attention to them, and they passed the test. And I've had mixed success. There's some other kids in there that really didn't. And part of the problem is that with the 1-day tech class is that it's 6 hours, and a lot of kids don't have that kind of attention span. Mm-hmm. So kids in a 1-day tech class can be tough. Let's put it that way. Right. On the other hand, I've had lots of kids go through the class and pass. So it all depends on the kid, really.
So was that the youngest person you ever licensed?
I think there was, probably 10 is the youngest. There might have been one that was 9, but I know there was a girl in the class who was 9 once, but I don't think she passed. So let's just say 10. 10 was the youngest that ever passed the test.
So you said you gave them a little extra attention. What other kind of suggestions would you say about teaching kids?
Man, yeah, it's tough. It's like trying to figure out how much they're interested in it, and then why they're interested in it, and then emphasize those parts. Mm-hmm. Like for example, one kid that was in the class, he was really interested in doing radio control models, like the drone kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So we talked about that a little bit more. That kept him sort of more interested in the class.
Well, that's cool. Yeah,
so I think that's the key.
Yeah, I've always wanted to learn about that, or to actually go out and do that. I have a fascination with model airplanes and drones and stuff like that. And I know you can do it with amateur radio, but I've never really gotten into, finding out where you can get the radio equipment for it and stuff like that. And I actually have that. I actually set that up to write a blog post about it like a year and a half ago, and I have yet to do anything with it. So if any of y'all out there listening know anything about remote control airplanes, please, or drones or anything like that using the amateur bands, please give me shoot me an email. Definitely, I would love to have you on the podcast.
And the advantage of using amateur radio to do this is that you can use more power than you can with just the commercially available radio control stuff. With 1 watt, if you equip your drone with some kind of camera, man, you could fly that thing a mile or more. Whereas you really couldn't do that, I don't think, with the commercially available stuff. They're limited to, 100 or 200 milliwatts.
Mm-hmm. At least the general commercial type installations. We actually have a drone at my work. I work for the sheriff's office in a county next door to where I live, and the drone that we have, you can actually fly like 2.5 miles.
Yeah, so, yeah. You got the super duper version.
Oh yeah, it was like 22,000, I think, is what they paid for it. So definitely on the higher end of thing, and probably not the general population is going to buy.
Right. Right.
So we've talked about the youngest. What about the oldest? What's the oldest person you've licensed?
Oh, that's another good question. I mean, I've had folks in their 70s for sure. Yeah. In fact, one of the first time I taught at the University of Michigan, I had one of the guys in there was a retired electrical engineering professor. He had quite a reputation actually, and so I always joke, I even teach PhDs from the University of Michigan. But he must have been about but at least 70, and it was the same thing. He'd always wanted to get a ham radio license, and this was a perfect format for him. So he. I actually get that a lot. I get a lot of people who have retired and then decided to take up this hobby.
So when you first started out the class, do you go around? I'm assuming you probably go around and everybody tell their name or whatever. Do you ask them why they're here, why they want to get their license?
Yeah, yeah. I'd say, well, we got a lot of people in the class. We want to get started, but just tell us a little bit about how you got interested in ham radio and what you think you might want to do with ham radio.
Be a good way to learn, especially with the kids and stuff, why they're there. So definitely,
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we do that's what we kind of do in a ham radio club meeting, right? We go around and introduce ourselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've gone through how to give the tech class, and the way that you teach your class, and the more ham cram, and I'm doing air quotes here because it's not really a ham cram, but the 1-day class, there is not a lot of time for people to learn it, and even with the multi-class, there's really not a lot of time for people to learn about the hobby. Do you do follow-up classes with yours?
I keep saying I'm going to do it, and then we really haven't gotten around to that. But like I said before, what I do tell them is that to consider me their Elmer, and if they've got a question or if they got a problem with something, please give me a call, and I'll try my best to help them. And people, a lot of them do take me up on that. For example, a guy was supposed to come over yesterday or the day after, or yesterday or today, and he had bought a KX3, and he hadn't been able to make any contacts. So he wanted to test to see if it was actually outputting any power. Mm-hmm. And so I said, well, bring it over. We'll connect my dummy load to it and my watt meter, and we'll see if it's outputting any power. So I'm always happy to do that,
Right.
I'll program somebody's HT. I've got chirp and the right cable, and we'll do that. So I just try to make myself available to help them out.
So if a club wanted to do some type of extra training classes after somebody gets their license, what would you recommend they focus on first?
Well, most of those guys are going to get an HT, right? So, try to do the program an HT night, Mm-hmm. That would be a good first thing. Encourage everybody to come to field day and see what happens on field day. I do the GOTA station on field day, and I try to get every single one of those people that's been in my class the previous year to come and make some contacts, Mm-hmm. Actually, first off, come and help me set up, I have this, the mast, the fiberglass mast thing, and we set up an inverted V, fan dipole, 20 and 40 meters, and I try to make that an instructive thing. I say, oh yeah, so we're going to get this the center of the antenna up about 30 feet, and you see it's got two sets of elements. That's a fan dipole, and when we transmit on 40 meters, the waves go down the 40 meter elements, but the impedance is too high on the 20 meter elements, so it doesn't go into those wires. And so I try to make it a whole instructive thing out of it.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you're doing an awesome job at being an Elmer.
Yeah, I try.
That unfortunately is one of the things that's around here, anyways. I don't know how it is everywhere else, but around here, a good Elmer is hard to find. And we as hams, especially those that have been licensed longer, we really need to work on being our Elmer. And I actually talked about this in a previous episode, back in episode number 35, about being an Elmer and doing your part. So if you want to go back and listen to that, it was a pretty good episode, if I do say so myself. But you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/35. So if you are interested in being an Elmer or wanting to find an Elmer, go back and listen to that. So, Dan, that pretty much is all I can think of. Is there anything else that you want to tell the listeners?
Yeah, so I'd just like to mention one more thing. There's a Yahoo group, the Ham Instructor Yahoo group, and it's a mailing list. We have quite a few members actually, and it's a low traffic group. We don't get you're not going to get an email even every other day from it. But every once in a while, we have some good discussions about teaching ham classes and, what's worked, what hasn't worked. And I would encourage anyone out there to subscribe to that list if you're teaching classes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm actually a member of that group, and I will second that. If you want to be a instructor or teach a class, it is definitely something to get into. Ask questions, and there's a lot of knowledgeable people on there that are happy to answer, including Dan himself. So I understand that you're going to be at Hamvention this year.
Right. So yeah, I should have mentioned that. I'm going to be speaking again at Dayton. Last year I talked about CW, and this year I'm teaching. I could be talking about teaching a 1-day tech class.
Cool. So basically, what we talk about here.
Exactly. Actually, exactly what we talked about here. It's going to be at 9:15 on Friday morning.
9:15 on Friday. Where is it? What room is it going to be in? Do you know?
Room 4, whatever that means.
Okay.
It's a new venue this year, so
absolutely.
So who knows? I knew where the rooms were before. Now I have no idea. But it's room 4.
Absolutely, it's going to be a learning experience for everyone, I'm sure.
Yep. I'm looking forward to it, though. I think it's going to be great. I was one of the biggest voices saying they should move it, and I think they're going to be. There's going to be 30,000 people there this year instead of 25,000.
Yeah. It's. I'm expecting it to be a whole lot bigger. I mean, if nothing else, the first year at a new venue, people are going to want to go and see what's changed. People that have been there before, it's a big event and stuff, but with the new venue, I'm expecting there to be a massive outcoming for it.
Yep.
So, Dan, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight and talking to us about how to teach a technician class. And again, thank you for being a sponsor of this podcast. You can find Dan at KB6NU.com. Again, he is the author of the No Nonsense Study Guides. What other books do you have up on your website?
Well, the other big one is the CW Geek's Guide to Having Fun with Morse Code. I'm a big CW operator, and it's kind of as the name implies, the whole idea is it doesn't teach you about the history of Morse code or really like the techniques of Morse code or anything. Just how to have the most fun operating Morse code. Then I have a couple other ones, but they're almost not worth mentioning. One is called 21 Things to Do After You Get Your Ham Radio License, and it's. I don't know. It's an okay book, but I need to come out with a second edition to make it better.
So if you are interested in CW or getting your license or upgrading, definitely head on over there to KB6NU.com. And I will have some links in the show notes of today's episode to get a copy of that on the Amazon. And you can also go directly to his website as well. So Dan, again, thank you very much for coming on. And I guess I will talk to you in the instructors group, if not before.
My pleasure. Really, it was a great having me on.
Great, thank you, sir. 73 to you.
7-3.
Alrighty, so that was a great talk I had there with Dan, and I hope y'all really enjoyed it. I'm going to try and get through the rest of this pretty fast. We don't have a whole lot left here. I'm already top of the hour mark, so let's go ahead and continue on. In our Ham blog spotlight, you can find out more about what we talked about in today's episode, because Dan actually wrote a blog post about this. This is actually where I got the idea for this podcast episode, and you can find it in the show notes of today's episode, or you can go to KB6NU.com and read more about it. So I'm not going to tell you a whole lot about it because I just spent the last hour basically telling you about it. So if you'd like more information, check that out. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our upcoming events. All of the times that I am going to be giving you is in Zulu time. So make sure you make the appropriate time conversions, okay? All right, so let's get started. First off, we have the Holy Land DX contest, and that is on April the 14th, starting at 2100 hours, going to April 15th at 2100 hours. We have the ES Open HF Championship, and it is on April the 15th in 3 1-hour block segments, starting at 5 o'clock, goes from 5 to 5:59, 6 to 6:59, so on and so forth, all the way up to 8:59. The YUDX contest is April the 15th, starting at 1200 hours, and it goes to the 16th at 11:59. The CQ Manchester Minera DX contest is on April the 15th from 1200 hours to 23:59 on the 16th. The Michigan QSO party starts at 1600 hours on the 15th of April and runs to 400 hours on the 16th of April. The North Dakota QSO party is the same weekend, going from 1800 hours on the 15th to 1800 hours on the 16th. We also have the Ontario QSO Party. It starts April the 15th at 1800 hours and runs till 5 o'clock in the morning on the 16th, and then follows up from 1200 hours to 1800 hours. The ARRL Rookie Roundup on single sideband. Really neat thing for all y'all newcomers out there. Check out this little contest. Pretty neat. And it runs on April the 16th from 1800 hours to 2359. Next up, we have the Low Power Spring Sprint. It is on the 17th of April from 1400 hours to 2000 hours. The SPDX RTTY contest is on April the 22nd from 1200 hours to the 23rd at 1200 hours. We have the Nebraska QSO Party. It starts at 1300 hours on the 22nd, runs till 1 o'clock in the morning, the 23rd, and then followed up from 1300 hours to 2200 hours. And last but not least, we have the BARTG Sprint 75, which I'm assuming is the 75 megahertz or the 75 meter band, rather. And it is on April the 23rd from 1700 hours to 2059. All the information from this segment was taken from the WA7BNM contest calendar, which you can find a link to in today's show notes. All right, so as far as Hamfest goes, we actually have quite a few of them on here for the next 2 weekends, so hang on to your seat because here we go. On April the 15th, we have the April Hamfest at DeVry in Phoenix, Arizona. We have the Flamingo Net UMARC Free Flea in Coral Gables, Florida. Ham Bash 2017 in Kansas City, Missouri. The Pawa Hamfest in South Portland, Maine. The Roanoke Division Convention, Raleigh Hamfest in Raleigh, North Carolina, and the TARC in Tampa, Florida. On the 16th, we have the Flea at MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The next weekend, starting on the 21st, we have the Eastern VHF UHF Microwave Contest in Manchester, Connecticut, the Idaho State Convention in Boise, Idaho, and the International DX Convention in Visalia, California. On the 22nd, we have quite a few of them, so there's a lot going on the 22nd. We have the 27th Annual Down East Hamfest in Kingston, North Carolina. We have the Aurora 17 Convention in White Bear Lake, Minnesota. The Bernard Area Hamfest in Bernard, Minnesota. We have the Calhoun Hamfest in Sugar Valley, Georgia. The Chossel, Michigan Hamfest in Chossel, Michigan. Communications Academy XIX, which would be 19, in Seattle, Washington. The Delaware State Convention, Delmarva Amateur Radio and Electronics Expo in Georgetown, Delaware. The DMRAA Hamfest in Des Moines, Idaho. The Drumlins ARC Hamfest in Palmyra, New York. I probably mispronounced that name. Sorry about that. The EARC Hamfest Swap Meet in Honolulu, Hawaii. Lewis and Clark Radio Club Hamfest 2017 in Godfrey, Illinois. The North Central Indiana Hamfest in Peru, Indiana. Piney Hills Hamfest and Hot Dog Social in Ruston, Louisiana. The Ranson Auction 2017 in Gales Ferry, Connecticut. Spring 2017 Kai Harris Free Flea in Oakland Park, Florida. The Valley Radio Club Swap Fest in Eugene, Oregon. And last on that day is the Wiregrass Amateur Radio Club Spring Tailgate in Headland, Alabama. On the 23rd, we have the AARO Fest 2017 in Galva, Illinois. The Framingham ARA Spring Flea Market in Framingham, Massachusetts. The North Jersey Hamfest in Saskatchewan. Yeah, this one's a really hard name. Saskatchewan, New Jersey, I guess, maybe. Sorry, I really butchered that name. And Two Rivers ARC Hamfest in Boston, Pennsylvania. All the information was taken from the ARRL Hamfest calendar, which you can find a link to in the show notes of today's episode. All right, y'all. So normally, right now, we'd be having the news. I think I might be doing away with this segment, with the news segment. It tends to be a week and a half behind whenever I do the recording and when the episode goes live. So it does get kind of old news. Granted, people have said, I haven't heard it before. But I think I'm going to do away with it. Like I said, it tends to be a little older news. On top of that, the reason I'm not doing it this episode in particular is because I've had an extremely busy week. So this is kind of what's making me lean towards not having this segment anymore. I didn't really find a whole lot of interesting stories to share with y'all. Unfortunately, I did find a lot of people, hams going silent key, which is kind of sad, or actually really sad, but I didn't feel like that would be a good thing to share, a whole bunch of sad news. So I decided to kind of not have this segment. Well, not kind of, but I'm not having this segment this episode. On top of not finding any a whole lot of news articles, I did find a couple, or one, but I thought about it. I'm like, I've had a lot of stuff going on this week, and if you're still with me, I know it's an hour and 10 minutes into this episode, but if you're still with me, I want to share a little bit. This week has been a triumphant weekend for me. Extremely busy, but very triumphant. I know a couple episodes back I told you all about the 4 foster kids that we have, that we were approaching the end of their case, and today is pretty much the end of it. We actually went to court today, and their parents relinquished the rights to them, so they are available basically for us to adopt. So here, probably within 90 days, because we have to have a 90-day wait period in case anybody in the family appeals. We have to wait. We have to wait that time frame. So sometime around mid-July or so, look for me having some excellent news that my wife and I are able to adopt these 4 beautiful children. We love them very much. We've had them for a little over a year now, and they just love us half to death. And their personalities are just done a total 180 from what they were when they came to us originally back in October of 2015. Yeah, I know the math doesn't add up, but they actually went home for about 3.5 months, and then unfortunately came back to us. Or fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it. But that's the news from my family. So, yeah, like I said, it's been a very exciting week, and I am just over the moon today. So, on top of Dan was an awesome for coming on today. I actually had another topic planned to talk about in this episode, but unfortunately I couldn't get on the same page with the people that I was talking to, and Dan was kind enough to jump in kind of at the last minute. I actually emailed him yesterday about this time last night, and said, hey, I really need your help. Can you come on and talk to us about this and push it up a little bit? So he was kind enough to come on and talk to us, and I hope that y'all found a lot of information from this episode, and maybe you can take some of it to your classes if you teach, and if you don't, maybe this will give you the oomph you need to start one if you so choose to do that. All the links that we've talked about today are in the show notes. You can find them again at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/64. That's the number 64. I want to thank each and every one of y'all for y'all's continued support and listening. If you like what you heard here, please share it with your friends. There a lot of great information, especially about teaching this hobby to newcomers. So please share this with your friends. And if you want to do more than just listen, if you want to help out financially, there are several ways you can do that. And I'm not going to list them all like I normally do. I'm going to try and get away from that a little bit. But if you would like to to find out how you can support this podcast financially, just go to everythinghamradio.com/support, and there's 3 options there on how to do that. If you have not done so, please sign up for my email list. I send an email out whenever I publish a new podcast episode, or on the rare occasion that I do a new blog post. And you can do that at everythinghamradio.com/subscribe, or check out the bottom of the show notes. Fill out the information, click on the sign me up button, and you'll get an email from me with a link that you'll need to click on. You have to do this before you start getting emails from me. And that's just to make sure that you actually are the person that signed up to receive the newsletters. I will not sell, rent, or otherwise distribute your email addresses. I hate spam as much as anybody does, so I will not do that to you, I promise. Last but not least, make sure you check me out on Facebook. The group page is at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio. I wish I would have done that before I did the page, but you can also find the page at facebook.com/everythinghamradio. I am on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio, which I'm going to try do a little bit more to it. I know I've told you that in the past. I wanted to do like a face cam or something like that when I'm recording these episodes, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that anytime soon, but I'm looking at some other avenues to add to my YouTube repertoire. That's a big word. Fancy word too, repertoire. Last but not least, you can find me on Twitter at K5CLM, which is probably that, or Facebook is the easiest to get a hold of me. So thank you for all my followers on Facebook and on Twitter, on YouTube, and for all of y'all's continued support. Links, like I said, can be found in the show notes of today's episode. You can find all my social pages on my website under social in the menu bar. And I've got some upcoming things that I'm working on, so stay tuned for in future episodes on some Everything Ham Radio swag stuff. I got some coasters, some drink coasters, clocks, some mouse pads, some travel mugs, some coffee cups, stuff like that I'm working on that you can purchase with the Everything Ham Radio podcast logo on it. So stay tuned for that. I should know something about it in the next couple episodes, and we'll be telling y'all where to find it. And also follow me on all my social media stuff, and we'll make sure and announce that, as well as send it out to my email list. I guess with that, I will go ahead and bid y'all adieu. And I guess until next time, this is K5CLM signing out. 73 y'all.